kinds of lessons that India can teach us? I mean, first let's start from the Asian Development Bank. You know, how do you look at ASEAN? What are the challenges ahead for us?
Right, thank you, Maria. Let me start by saying that it's a pleasure and a privilege for me to be here in such august company, both on the dais and in the audience. Now, what is the objective? If I go by what we set out to achieve in ADB, we want societies that are free of poverty. We want societies that have less inequity or inequality. Now, what is the scorecard? So if we go by the history, what happened in the US, the UK, and Japan in the 1800s happened in Asia 100 years later. And you've had 3 times investment in transport networks, you have 10 times investment in energy. And we've lifted 1 billion people out of poverty. Now, so I agree with Tony that we've done well, ASEAN has done well. Now, but where are we today? So you have 400 million lacking electricity, 300 million don't have safe drinking water, 1.5 billion don't have basic sanitation facilities. So in other words, we have a long way to go. Now, how can this be done? So I think it's sort of become axiomatic that to get all this development across, you need infrastructure. An ADBI study shows that a 10% increase in energy actually increases exports of that economy by about 7%. A 10% increase in financial services has a kicker of 5%. And of course, transport, roads and all are more expensive. A 10% increase in transportation leads to a 2% increase in exports. In other words, and this is only one metric that we are tracking. So in other words, we need huge investment. Now, what is the investment gap? 26 trillion by estimates of ADB itself up to 2030 for all of emerging Asia, and literally 60 billion a year in this region for infrastructure to come.
Sorry, just to clarify, 60 billion, is that right?
Well, 60 billion, yes.
60 billion dollars.
60 billion.
That's how much we need to just catch up, correct?
That's right.
In Southeast Asia, guys, we got to find $60 billion, and ADB will give it. No, sorry, continue.
Well, you never know. So, you know, with that kind of a requirement, where will the capital pools come from? So the good news is that there's a huge amount of money available. Emerging Asia saves 6 trillion a year. And the long funds, pension funds and all, pools of capital, 75 trillion is what is available. But what flows into infrastructure is barely 1%. So why does that happen? That happens basically because investors will only send in money where they are comfortable sending it. And in other words, you need to therefore create a matrix where the risk for investing is commensurate with the return. So I think there are a couple of things that need to be done in order to pull this infrastructure in. Basically, you will need to create conducive market conditions. And that means macroeconomic and political stability, proper dispute resolution, dependable laws and enactments, an enabling environment, dispute resolution. So those are the things that we will need to do. Their governments will have a very large role to play. The other problem